The tower guard collapsed without warning at 05:401 hours. No crack of gunfire, no flash in the darkness. Just a man standing one moment gone the next, swallowed by the blizzard that had turned the world into static. Through a scope 820 meters away, Corporal Caitlin Brennan watched him fall. Her finger was still on the trigger. Her heartbeat was still slowing from 72 beats per minute to 68. The crosshair was still steady on a point that no longer mattered because the target had ceased to exist. They said no one could make this shot. They were almost right. 72 hours earlier, the snow had been falling for 3 days without pause. It accumulated on the collapsed walls of what used to be a grain processing facility, built the rooflines into smooth white curves, filled the spaces between broken concrete until the entire compound looked like something ancient and frozen. From the high ground 800 meters to the north, the enemy had locked down every exit. They were patient. They had time. The 37 American soldiers trapped in the ruins did not. Forward Operating Base Winterhawk existed on maps as a waypoint, nothing more. 3 buildings with sagging roofs. Tarps stretched between them to create corridors protected from direct fire. Supply crates positioned to form barriers. It had never been intended as anything more than a place to rest between movements. Now it was a cage. Lieutenant Cole Rourke stood in what they called the command room, though it was really just the corner of the main building where the roof hadn't completely collapsed. A kerosene heater struggled against the cold and lost. The maps spread across a table made from ammunition crates showed their situation in lines that required no interpretation, surrounded on 3 sides. The 4th blocked by a frozen river too exposed to cross under observation. Staff Sergeant Bennett Hayes stood near the radio, his breath visible in the air. His face had the gaunt look of a man who had been rationing meals for too long. "Resupply was supposed to arrive 36 hours ago," Hayes said. "We're down to 1 meal per person per day, ammunition for another 48 hours if we're conservative." Rourke didn't answer. Everyone in the room already knew the numbers. The math was simple and brutal. Through the gap in the wall that served as a window, the high ground was barely visible through the snow, a hill crowned with the skeletal remains of a water tower. The enemy had taken it 3 days ago, and from there they commanded every approach. Artillery spotters, machine gun positions, possibly anti-tank weapons, though they hadn't revealed those yet. The tactical situation was clear enough that even a cadet could read it. They were trapped. The enemy was patient. Time favored the hunters. "We need to take that tower," Rourke said. Hayes pulled a topographic map from the stack. "We've tried twice, sir. Lost 4 people, confirming what we already knew. They've got overlapping fields of fire. Anyone who gets within 400 meters is cut down." Near the back of the room, a figure stood so still she might have been part of the wall. Master Sergeant Garrett Ashford was 62 years old, though the cold and the gray stubble on his jaw made him look older. His hands wrapped in fingerless gloves rested on the stock of his rifle the way a pianist's hands rest on keys. Natural, permanent. He had been shooting since before most of the people in this room were born. "Show me the angle again," Ashford said. Hayes unfolded a larger map marked with elevation lines and firing positions. His finger traced the distance from their location to the tower. 820 meters accounting for the slope. Wind from the northwest at approximately 15 knots gusting to 20s. The tower structure provides cover from every direction except this narrow window here. He tapped a spot on the map, maybe 10 degrees of exposure. But to get line of sight on that window, you'd need to be positioned here. The position he indicated was a collapsed building 200 meters from their current location. "That building is completely exposed," Ashford said. "And even if you could get there, the angle is impossible. You'd be shooting almost vertically through wind that's funneling between the structures, with snowfall reducing visibility to near zero at intervals." Ashford studied the map for a long moment. When he straightened, it was with the careful movement of a man whose back had carried too much weight for too many years. "No one can make that shot," he said. The words fell into the room like stones into deep water. No one argued because Ashford was the standard they all measured themselves against. 38 years of service, Gulf War, Bosnia, Kosovo, deployments to places that didn't have names on maps. If he said something couldn't be done, then it couldn't be done. Behind them, barely noticed Corporal Caitlin Brennan stood at the edge of the group. She was 27 years old, though exhaustion and 3 days without adequate sleep had carved shadows under her eyes that made her look older. Dark blonde hair pulled back tight, a face that revealed nothing. She had been assigned to the unit 5 months ago as additional marksman support, but in that time she had fired maybe a dozen shots in actual combat. Not because she was incompetent, simply because Ashford and the other senior shooters always had priority for any critical engagement. She was the backup, the reserve, the one who watched and waited and was never quite trusted with anything that mattered. Now she stood looking at the map, saying nothing, her mind running calculations that no one had asked her to make. Outside, the wind picked up. The tarp snapped and strained. Somewhere in the compound, someone was coughing with the deep, wet sound that suggested pneumonia might kill them before the enemy did. "We have maybe 2 days before they decide to push," Rourke said. "They know our situation. They're just waiting for us to be weak enough that they can walk in without losing people." "They're smart," Hayes agreed. "Patient. So we need to change the equation." Rourke turned to Ashford. "If we can't take that tower, can we make it unusable, force them to relocate their spotters? Not without getting close enough to use explosives, which brings us back to the same problem." The meeting dissolved into the kind of circular discussion that happens when there are no good options. Kate listened, but her eyes kept returning to the map. Her fingers bare despite the cold traced invisible calculations in the air. When the others finally dispersed, she remained. Rourke noticed her on his way out. "Something on your mind, Corporal?" She looked up. "Permission to study the position, sir." Ashford already looked at it. "Yes, sir." Rourke paused, then shrugged. "Knock yourself out. If you see something we missed, I want to hear it." When he was gone, Kate stood alone in the cold room. She stared at the map for another 10 minutes, committing every elevation line to memory. Then she pulled on her coat and went outside. The snow had eased momentarily. In the gaps between buildings, she could just make out the tower in the distance. She watched it, noting how the wind carried the snow in visible bands, how the light changed as clouds moved, how the patterns repeated with mechanical precision. Then she walked toward the collapsed building marked on the map. It took her 15 minutes to reach it, moving carefully through covered positions. The building was even more exposed than the map suggested. 3 walls down, the 4th leaning at a dangerous angle. No roof. Anyone who tried to set up here would be visible from multiple enemy positions. But Kate wasn't thinking about setting up a normal shooting position. She was thinking about the snow. Caitlin Brennan had learned to shoot from her father on a ranch in Montana. Wide spaces where wind mattered more than textbooks suggested. Where cold metal burned your skin if you touched it wrong. Where patience was measured in hours, not minutes. Her father had been a hunter and a rancher, but before that he had been a sniper in Korea. He never talked about the war except to say that winter in Montana was good training for winter anywhere else. He had taught her to read wind by how it felt on exposed skin, not what an instrument said. To shoot in conditions where breath fogged scopes and fingers went numb. To understand that in Montana, if you missed your shot, you went hungry. She had enlisted at 18, trained at Fort Benning, been marked early as having potential. Her scores were good, not exceptional, but consistently good. She could hit targets at range, could read wind, could maintain her equipment. But in the military, good wasn't always enough. You needed to be exceptional, or you needed to be loud about being good. Kate was neither. She had watched others advance. Watched them volunteer for difficult assignments. Watched them cultivate relationships with senior shooters, absorb their knowledge, make themselves indispensable. She had simply done her job, qualified when required, kept her rifle clean, waited for orders, and slowly, without quite meaning to, she had become invisible. Now, standing in the ruins of the collapsed building, she watched the tower through the falling snow. She timed the intervals between the heavy bands, 38 minutes, then 40, then 39, an average of 39.3 minutes between periods when visibility dropped to near zero. Each period lasted approximately 90 seconds. The wind funneled between the buildings, but it wasn't random. Every structure created eddies and channels. The pattern repeated, 8 seconds of relative calm, then gusts, then calm again. She could see it now, the rhythm of it. The impossible shot might not be impossible after all. She returned to the command room long after midnight. The kerosene heater had been turned down to conserve fuel. The maps were still spread across the table. She stood over them, pulling out a notebook, and began to write. Distance 820 meters, accounting for the slope effective distance 837 meters. Wind from northwest at 15 knots, sustained gusting to 20. Temperature negative 18 Celsius, barometric pressure dropping. She worked through the ballistic calculations by hand. Bullet drop at this range and temperature. Wind deflection across the distance. The effect of shooting at a 47-degree upward angle. Spin drift. The Coriolis effect at this latitude. The numbers filled page after page. At 0200 hours, she set down her pen and stared at what she had written. On paper, using the standard calculations, the shot was nearly impossible. The margin for error was so small that any single variable being slightly off would result in a miss. But she wasn't using standard calculations anymore. She was accounting for the pattern. At 0300 hours, Kate left the command room and moved through the darkness toward the collapsed building. She had memorized the route, knew which paths provided cover from observation, moved with the careful silence her father had taught her when stalking elk in snow. The building was darker at night, more skeletal. She positioned herself where she had stood earlier and looked toward the tower. Through the snow, she could barely see it, but she didn't need to see it clearly right now. She needed to feel the wind, to time the pattern, to understand the rhythm of this specific piece of ground. She stood there for 40 minutes, motionless, letting the cold seep into her bones. Feeling how the wind moved, how it gusted and calmed, how the snow fell in bands that swept across the landscape like curtains being drawn and opened. At 0342 hours, a heavy band moved through. Visibility dropped to less than 50 meters. She timed it. 92 seconds. Then the snow thinned. The tower became visible again as a dark blur against the white. At 0421 hours, another band, 87 seconds. At 0500 hours, another 91 seconds. The pattern held. She was about to leave when she heard voices, enemy patrol, 2 men, maybe 3, moving along the perimeter. She froze, pressing herself against a chunk of broken concrete. The voices came closer, boots crunching in snow, the red glow of a cigarette. They stopped less than 20 meters from her position. Kate controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, became part of the rubble. This was another thing her father had taught her. In Montana, when you were hunting, sometimes you were also being hunted. The mountain lions and bears didn't care about your rifle. You learned to be still, to be invisible. The patrol stayed for 4 minutes, smoking, talking in a language she didn't understand. Then they moved on, their voices fading into the wind. Kate waited another 10 minutes before moving. When she finally returned to the compound, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Not much, just the faintest suggestion that somewhere above the clouds the sun still existed. She went back to the command room and added new data to her calculations. Wind patterns confirmed. Snowband intervals confirmed. Approach route viable via drainage culvert on the eastern side. Enemy patrol pattern noted. The shot was possible, difficult, requiring perfect timing and execution, but possible. Now she just needed someone to believe her. The morning briefing began at 0800 hours. The same faces gathered in the same cold room. Rourke looked like he hadn't slept. Hayes had the radio operator's report in his hand, and it wasn't good news. "Relief force has been delayed," Hayes said. "Weather's grounding air support. Ground convoy is dealing with roadblocks and ambushes. Earliest arrival is now 4 days." We don't have 4 days, Rourke said quietly. No, sir, we don't. Ashford stood near the map, studying it with the expression of a man looking at a puzzle he couldn't solve. Kate watched him from her position near the back. She had cleaned her rifle twice already this morning. A ritual, something to do with her hands while her mind ran through the calculations again. We need options, Rourke said. Anything, even bad ones. Hayes glanced at the map. We could attempt to break out across the river at night. Low visibility, move fast. They'd hear us on the ice, cut us down before we made it halfway. We could try to take the tower again. Different approach. Use smoke. Same result. We'd lose people and gain nothing. The room fell into frustrated silence. Kate set down her rifle, stood, walked to the front of the room. The shot is possible, sir. Everyone turned. Rourke frowned. Hayes looked skeptical. Ashford's expression was unreadable. Corporal Brennan, Rourke said slowly. Sergeant Ashford already assessed. I know what he assessed, sir, but I've been studying the position. The wind isn't random. It has patterns. She moved to the map, pulled out her notebook. The pages were filled with numbers, diagrams, timing sequences. The snow falls in heavy bands every 39 minutes on average. Each band lasts approximately 90 seconds. During those periods, visibility drops to near zero. The wind funnels between these buildings. She traced the path with her finger, creating 8-second lulls in a repeating pattern. If you time the shot to coincide with both the snow band and the wind lull, the conditions become manageable. Hayes stepped forward, looking at her notes. Even if that's true, Corporal, you've never engaged a target past 500 meters in combat. No, Staff Sergeant, but I've calculated the trajectory. 6.2 mils elevation to account for the distance and angle, 3 inches right to compensate for spin drift at this range, 0.3 mils additional for the temperature gradient between ground level and the tower elevation. She turned to Ashford. Am I wrong about the calculations? Ashford took the notebook, studied her work for a long moment. His finger traced down the columns of numbers. When he looked up, his expression was complex. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. The math is sound, he said quietly, but experience matters, Corporal. Calculations are one thing. Execution under pressure is another. I understand that, Sergeant, but someone should try. Someone? Rourke's voice had an edge. You mean you? Kate met his eyes. Yes, sir. The room was silent except for the wind outside and the hiss of the kerosene heater. Hayes broke the silence. Sir, even if the shot is theoretically possible, it's high risk. If she misses, she reveals our intent. They'll fortify that position. We'll never get another chance. I won't miss, Kate said. The words came out with more confidence than she felt, but she didn't let it show. Rourke studied her. Your assessment, Sergeant Ashford. Ashford looked at Kate for a long moment. She could see him weighing factors she couldn't name. Experience, risk, desperation, something else. Her analysis of the wind patterns is correct, he said. I missed it because I was calculating based on averages. She's calculating based on observed patterns. That's good fieldcraft. He paused. But this is still an extremely difficult shot. Low probability of success, high risk of compromise. So your recommendation is no. My recommendation is that the lieutenant makes the call. Rourke turned back to Kate. You've been with this unit 5 months. In that time, you've been reliable, competent, but you've never been tested like this. Why should I trust you with a shot that could determine whether 37 people live or die? Kate had known this question was coming. She had thought about the answer all morning. Because I'm not asking you to trust me, sir. I'm asking you to trust the math. The shot is possible. I have the training to make it, and if I fail... She paused. You're down one person who wasn't critical to your defensive plan anyway. It was brutal calculus, and she could see it land. Rourke's expression flickered. The logic was sound, even if it was cold. But Rourke shook his head. Request denied, he said. It's too risky. If you take that shot and miss, you've told them exactly what we're trying to do. They'll adapt. We lose the element of surprise and gain nothing. He looked around the room. We go with Ashford's original plan, harassment fire, make them nervous, buy time and hope the relief force arrives before they decide to finish this. Kate straightened. Yes, sir. She walked back to her position, picked up her rifle, and left the room without another word. Behind her, Hayes spoke quietly. She's not wrong about the timeline, sir. I know, Rourke said, but I can't approve a suicide mission based on desperation math. Ashford was staring at the map again, his fingers tracing the same path Kate had described. Sometimes, he said slowly, the math isn't the only thing that matters. What does that mean? It means I told her no one could make that shot, and I believed it when I said it. He looked up. But 39 years ago, someone told me the same thing about a different shot, and I didn't try it because I listened to them, and because I didn't try. 4 people died who might not have. The room went very quiet. What happened? Rourke asked. We were in Germany, Fulda Gap, winter of 1985, Soviet observation post across the valley, 950 meters, bad conditions, everyone said it was impossible, so I didn't try. His voice was flat, and the Soviets found our position 2 days later. We lost 4 people in the firefight, people who might have survived if I had just tried. You can't know that. No, but I've spent 39 years wondering. Ashford folded the map. I'm not saying approve her request. You're right to be cautious. I'm just saying sometimes the impossible shot is less impossible than doing nothing. That night, while the others tried to sleep, Ashford found Kate on watch. She was positioned at the north observation point, a gap in a collapsed wall with a clear view toward enemy positions. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. He settled beside her with the careful movements of someone whose joints protested the cold. For a while they sat in silence, watching the snow fall through the darkness. I never told anyone the full story, Ashford said finally. About that shot I didn't take. Kate glanced at him but said nothing. We were outside Hunfeld, winter like this. Our position was compromised and we were waiting for extraction. The Soviets had a spotter in a church tower about 950 meters out. He was calling in our location, directing fire. Every time we tried to move, mortars landed right on top of us. He pulled out a cigarette, thought better of it, put it away. I had a shot, narrow window, maybe 5 seconds every few minutes when the wind cleared enough to see, but the angle was bad. The distance was at the edge of my effective range, and I'd been awake for 36 hours. My hands were shaking from cold and exhaustion. What did your spotter say? He said to take it. Said we had nothing to lose, but the senior officer said no. Said it was too risky, that if I missed and revealed our position, we'd lose our concealment. Better to wait for extraction. And you listened? I listened because he was right. Tactically, the percentages didn't favor the shot. Ashford's voice went flat. Extraction was delayed. Weather. And while we waited, the mortars kept coming. 4 people died in the next 8 hours. 3 more were wounded badly enough they never served again. The spotter stayed in that tower the whole time, calling in coordinates. Kate watched the falling snow. You can't know if you would have made the shot. No, but I know I didn't try. And that's the thing I carry. He turned to look at her. When I say no one can make that shot, I mean it. The conditions are terrible. The angle is nearly impossible. And you're not experienced enough to compensate for all the variables. I know. But I also know that I've been wrong before. And I know that sometimes the impossible shot is the only shot there is. The lieutenant won't approve it. Probably not. He's thinking about the unit, about keeping everyone alive. That's his job. Ashford shifted, old bones creaking. But you're thinking about something different. You're thinking about the shot itself, about what's possible if someone just tries. Is that wrong? No, it's just different. He was quiet for a moment, then, if you were going to attempt that shot, hypothetically, when would you do it? Kate had been watching the patterns for days now. Tomorrow, early morning, there's a snow band that comes through around 05:30. Heavy, then another at 07:15. The first one is better. Temperature inversion will be less pronounced. Wind typically drops just before dawn. You've been tracking this. Yes, Sergeant. And you've calculated the trajectory, accounted for the vertical angle, the temperature gradient, the wind deflection. Ashford pulled out a small notebook, scribbled some numbers, handed it to her. Check my math. She looked at the calculations. He had worked through the same trajectory she had been calculating, but his numbers were different in a few key places. You're accounting for spin drift, she said. At that range in that wind it matters. 3 inches to the right of where you think you should aim. And you're adding correction for Coriolis effect. Less than an inch at this latitude, but yes, when you're shooting at the edge of possible, every inch counts. Kate studied the numbers, then looked at him. Why are you showing me this? Because if someone were to attempt that shot hypothetically, I'd want them to have the best information possible. Even if that shot had been officially denied by command. That sounds like you're suggesting insubordination. Ashford smiled slightly. I'm an old man who's seen too many people die because someone didn't try. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just sharing information with a fellow marksman who's interested in theoretical calculations. He stood slowly, joints protesting. The duty shift changes at 0500. The new watch won't be fully alert for maybe 15 minutes after that. And that collapsed building you were studying, there's a drainage culvert that runs most of the way there, provides cover from aerial observation. Sergeant, I'm not asking you to do anything, Corporal. I'm just an old man who can't sleep thinking out loud. He looked at her one more time. But if someone were to attempt something inadvisable, I'd probably be the first to notice them missing. And I might be slow to report it. Bad knees. Takes me a while to check positions. Then he walked away, leaving her alone in the cold with his calculations and the sound of falling snow. Kate didn't sleep. She spent the remaining hours checking her rifle, every part, every mechanism. She had already cleaned it twice, but she did it again. Not because it needed it, because the ritual helped her think. At 0430 she packed her gear, minimal load, rifle, ammunition, water, a thermal blanket, nothing else. Every ounce mattered when you were moving through snow. At 0450 she watched the duty change, saw the tired guard trudge away, saw the new one take position, watched him settle in, saw him stamp his feet against the cold, saw him pull his collar up against the wind. At 4:55 she moved. The drainage culvert Ashford had mentioned was barely wide enough for a person. Snow had drifted into it, but the concrete sides were still visible. She crawled more than walked, kept low, moved slowly. Speed didn't matter, silence did. It took her 20 minutes to cover the 200 meters to the collapsed building. By the time she reached it, her knees were soaked through and her hands were numb. She ignored both. Discomfort wasn't relevant. The building was worse up close. 3 walls down, rubble everywhere. But there was a corner where 2 partial walls met, creating an angle that would provide minimal cover. She positioned herself there, set her rifle on a chunk of concrete, began the final calculations. 05:15 hours. The snow band was coming. She could see it in the way the distant lights blurred, could feel it in the way the wind shifted. She checked her rifle one last time, adjusted her scope, set her breathing into the slow rhythm her father had taught her. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out, hold. The heartbeat steadied, the world narrowed. 5:20. On the tower she could just make out movement, guard change, someone checking the position. She watched, timing it. Every 12 minutes someone appeared for about 40 seconds, then disappeared back inside the structure. 5:28. The snow band was almost here. She could see it rolling across the landscape like a curtain. 30 seconds away, maybe less. She settled into position, stock firm against her shoulder. Cheek pressed to the rest, eye to the scope. Breathe, hold, breathe. 5:29. The snow hit, visibility dropped to nearly zero, the world became white noise. She could barely see the tower now, just a dark blur against the white. But she had memorized the exact position, could see it in her mind even when her eyes couldn't find it. In the command room, Ashford was performing his morning check of the positions. Moving slowly. His knees really did hurt. He noticed Kate's absence at 0532. 3 minutes later than he might have under different circumstances. He paused, looked at the duty log, saw that she was listed as off-duty. Then he walked to the observation point where he had spoken with her the night before and looked out toward the collapsed building he had mentioned. His face showed nothing. On the tower, the guard came back into view, right on schedule, 12 minutes since the last appearance. He stood in the narrow exposure window looking out over the landscape. He probably couldn't see much through the snow, probably felt safe. Caitlin Brennan exhaled slowly, let her heart beat once, twice, found the rhythm. On the third beat, in the pause between one breath and the next, her father's voice in her memory saying the words he had said 1,000 times on the ranch in Montana, "When you know now." She squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report was swallowed by the snow and wind. In any other conditions it would have been heard across the compound, but the snow band was at its heaviest and the wind was blowing nearly 25 knots. The sound dissipated into white noise, became part of the storm, vanished. The recoil pushed against Kate's shoulder. Familiar. Expected. She absorbed it and remained in position, eye to the scope tracking. This was the discipline her father had taught her. Never assume. Always confirm. Watch the bullets work. The distance was 823 meters. At that range, even a bullet moving at 2,650 feet per second takes time to arrive. 1.18 seconds. Time for wind to push it. Time for gravity to pull it. Time for 1,000 tiny variables to compound into something that meant the difference between success and catastrophe. Kate didn't breathe, didn't blink, just watched. On the tower, the guard was still standing in the exposure window, still looking out, still alive. Then he dropped. Not dramatically, not with the violent spin that movies show, just collapsed. One moment upright, the next moment gone, like someone had cut his strings. He disappeared behind the concrete parapet and did not rise again. Kate remained frozen in position. 30 seconds, 1 minute, watching for any sign of response, any indication that someone had heard the shot or seen the guard fall. The snow continued to fall. The wind continued to howl. The tower remained silent. 2 minutes. Still nothing. 3 minutes. A figure appeared in the exposure window. Different person, looking down probably at the fallen guard, then looking out across the landscape, searching for something that made sense of what had just happened. Kate didn't move. Her position was concealed by the snow and the rubble, and she was already fading back millimeter by millimeter, keeping the rifle steady, not making any sudden movement that might catch attention. The figure in the tower remained visible for 15 seconds, 20, then disappeared back inside. Kate waited another full minute, then slowly, painfully slowly, she withdrew from her position, left the rifle aimed at the tower but moved her eye from the scope, began the careful process of backing away. The world was returning now. Sound, sensation. The cold that she had been ignoring was demanding attention. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the adrenaline crash that comes after you do something that should have been impossible. She had just killed a man. The thought arrived with clinical precision, not emotional, just factual. 823 meters through a blizzard with a 47-degree vertical angle, and she had put a bullet exactly where she had calculated it would go. The guard on that tower had been alive, and now he was not, and the cause of that change was her. But there was no time to process that now. She needed to move. It took her 40 minutes to crawl back through the culvert, longer than the approach. She was fighting exhaustion now and the adrenaline crash that made her muscles feel like water. The cold that she had ignored was seeping into her bones. Her teeth were chattering. The wet fabric of her uniform was freezing against her skin. When she finally crawled out of the culvert and back into the compound, she found Ashford waiting. He didn't say anything, just offered his hand and helped her to her feet, then walked beside her back toward the command area. "You're soaked through," he said quietly. "You need to warm up." "I'm fine. You're hypothermic. I can see it in how you're moving." He guided her to a supply area where they kept the emergency gear, found a dry coat, a thermal blanket, a cup of something hot that might have been coffee, or might have been just hot water with flavor. "Drink," he said. She did. The warmth hurt going down, but it helped. Slowly the shaking eased. "The duty log will show you were off duty," Ashford said. "Resting. I checked your position at 0532 and you were there. I have no reason to believe otherwise." Kate looked at him. "Why?" "Because I told you about a shot I didn't take 39 years ago. And I don't want to tell that story twice." He paused. "Did you make it?" "I think so." "You think?" "I saw him drop, but I didn't see confirmation." Ashford nodded slowly. "Then we wait." They didn't have to wait long. At 0615 hours, the enemy's morning artillery barrage failed to materialize. They had been shelling the compound every morning at the same time for 3 days. Regular as clockwork, the shells would walk across their position, keeping them pinned, reminding them who controlled the high ground. This morning, nothing. At 0645, Lieutenant Rourke called Ashford to the command room. Kate followed at a distance, trying to look like she had just woken up, trying to hide the trembling in her hands. "Something's changed," Rourke said without preamble. "No morning barrage, no radio traffic from the tower. Our signal's intercept is hearing confusion on their command net." Staff Sergeant Hayes stood near the radio equipment, headphones on, listening to the enemy frequency. "They're reporting a man down at the tower position, sir. Sounds like they think it's a medical emergency." "Medical emergency?" "That's what it sounds like. They keep saying they didn't hear a shot, asking if it could have been a heart attack." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You have any insight on this, Sergeant Ashford?" The old marksman's face was carefully neutral. "Would need to see the tower to know, sir. We've got a drone up, just got the feedback." Rourke turned the laptop around. The screen showed the tower from above, grainy footage but clear enough. There was activity around the base, people moving, and in the exposure window that had been occupied by an enemy spotter for 3 days, nothing. "Their spotter's down," Hayes said. "Don't know how, but he's down." "Suspected friendly sniper action?" Rourke asked. "They don't seem to think so, sir. The confusion on their net suggests they're genuinely surprised. No gunshot heard, no muzzle flash seen. They're treating it like a medical event." Rourke looked around the room. His eyes passed over Kate, who was standing in the back, trying to be invisible. "We might have a window here, if we move fast." "What are you thinking, sir?" Hayes asked. "Extract now, while they're confused, before they get reorganized. The river is still exposed, but it's less exposed than it was when they had eyes on it from the tower, and if they can't direct their artillery, crossing becomes possible." Rourke was already pulling up maps. "We go in 30 minutes, light and fast, leave anything we can't carry." The room erupted into coordinated chaos. Orders given, gear packed. The unit that had been trapped for 3 days suddenly had motion and purpose. Through it all, Kate sat in the corner, wrapped in her thermal blanket, drinking water she didn't want, watching the activity. Her hands had stopped shaking, but she could still feel the rifle's recoil in her shoulder. Could still see the guard dropping through her scope. She had done it. The impossible shot. And now 37 people were going to leave this place alive because of it. But the price of that success was sitting in her chest like a stone. Ashford found her once more before the movement order came. "You did something impossible today," he said quietly. "I got lucky. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You prepared, you saw the opportunity, and you had the courage to take it when everyone else said no. I disobeyed orders. No. You took an action while off duty that happened to align with a positive outcome. There's no evidence you did anything wrong." He smiled slightly. "And even if there was, I'm an old man with bad knees. I might not remember the exact sequence of events if anyone asks." Kate looked at him. "The man on the tower. Did I kill him? Does it matter?" Ashford was quiet for a moment, then, "Yes, you probably did. From 800 meters in those conditions, the shot would have been lethal. He was just doing his job. So were you. And because of what you did, 37 people are going to leave this place alive who might not have otherwise." He put a hand on her shoulder. "That's the burden we carry. Every shot has a cost, and the hardest ones to carry are the ones that save your friends." At 0700 hours, the unit moved out. They crossed the frozen river in a staggered column, each person running in the footsteps of the one before. The ice groaned but held. From the tower there was no response, no directed fire, just the occasional random burst that suggested confusion more than coordination. Kate went in the second wave. Her legs were still unsteady from the cold and exhaustion, but she kept pace. Behind her, the last elements of the unit were collapsing their defensive positions, grabbing what supplies they could, preparing to burn the rest. On the far bank, they pushed into the tree line and kept moving. Fast walking pace, not running. Running would exhaust them too quickly, but steady movement, putting distance between themselves and the kill zone. After 2 hours, Rourke called a halt. The unit collapsed in a defensive perimeter, catching breath, checking feet for frostbite, distributing the last of the rations. Hayes found Kate. "The lieutenant wants to see you." She expected questions, maybe a reprimand. Instead, Rourke just looked at her for a long moment. "Ashford says you were off duty this morning," he said. "Yes, sir." "And he checked your position at 0532. "Yes, sir." "I see." Rourke glanced at Ashford, who was methodically cleaning his rifle nearby, then back to Kate. "Whatever happened this morning, it saved this unit. The tower spotter went down right before we needed to move. Timing was convenient." Kate said nothing. "I'm not asking questions I don't want answers to," Rourke continued. "But I want you to understand something. Command authority exists for a reason. When someone disobeys orders, even with good intentions, it creates problems. It undermines structure. It makes it harder to maintain discipline." "Yes, sir." "That said," he paused, "sometimes the situation on the ground changes faster than orders can adapt. Sometimes soldiers have to make judgment calls." His gaze held steady. "You did good work this deployment, Corporal. I'm putting you in for a commendation." "That's not necessary, sir." "It's not about necessary, it's about recognizing value. You've been with this unit 5 months. In that time, you've been reliable, competent, and when it mattered most, you were where you needed to be, doing what needed to be done. However that happened." After he walked away, Kate sat alone for a few minutes. The adrenaline was gone now. What remained was exhaustion and the hollow feeling that comes after crisis. And something else, something heavier. She had killed someone today, a person with a name she would never know, someone who had been standing in a tower doing his job and then suddenly wasn't. Because of a decision she had made, a trigger she had pulled, the math said it was justified. 37 lives saved, 1 life taken, the equation balanced. But equations didn't account for the way her hands still shook when she closed her eyes, or the image that kept replaying in her mind of a figure dropping out of sight, or the question that would probably never leave her. What if she had missed Ashford settled beside her? He didn't say anything, just sat. After a while he spoke. "It doesn't get easier." "What doesn't?" "This, what you're feeling. People think that with experience, with time, it becomes routine, but it doesn't. Every shot that matters, every time you take a life to save others, it costs something, and you carry it." "How do you carry it?" "Honestly, I'm not sure I do, not all of it." He was quiet for a moment. "But I know that I carry it better than I'd carry the alternative. I'd rather live with the shots I took than the shots I didn't." "That's not much comfort." "No, but it's true." His eyes found hers. "You made an impossible shot today under conditions that should have made it fail. That takes skill, preparation, and something else. Something that can't be taught." "What?" "The willingness to try when everyone else says it can't be done. That's rare, and it's valuable. Don't lose it." The unit moved out again at 1,000 hours. They rendezvoused with the relief force at 1400, and by evening they were back at a secure forward base with hot food and real beds. Kate slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, the world had moved on. The unit was being debriefed. Reports were being written. The incident at the abandoned compound was already becoming a tactical case study. Enemy positions, response times, lessons learned. The tower spotter's death was noted in the intelligence report as enemy KIA cause, unknown suspected friendly sniper action. No attribution, No investigation into who specifically had taken the shot. Kate read the report in the common area while nursing coffee that actually tasted like coffee. The words were clinical, factual. They didn't capture what it felt like to pull that trigger, what it cost to make that shot. 3 days later, the full intelligence briefing came through. Kate was in the common area when Hayes read it aloud to the assembled unit. Enemy casualty identified as Senior Sergeant Viktor Sokolov, age 34, former Soviet military instructor, decorated veteran, survived by wife Marina and 2 daughters ages 6 and 4. The room went quiet. Hayes continued reading from the translated intercept. Sokolov's unit is requesting investigation into cause of death. Initial assessment suggests possible cardiac event. No evidence of hostile fire detected at time of incident. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. She set down her coffee carefully, stood up slowly, and walked out of the room before anyone could see her expression. Outside, she found an empty supply tent, sat down on a crate, put her head in her hands. Viktor Sokolov, 34 years old, a father, 2 little girls who were waiting for him to come home, who didn't know yet that he never would. She had killed a father, a husband, someone who had probably kissed his daughters goodbye before deploying, who had probably promised them he would come back safe. The math still said it was justified. 37 American soldiers saved, 1 enemy combatant killed. The mission was successful, the outcome was optimal. But Viktor Sokolov's daughters didn't care about optimal outcomes. Kate pulled out a piece of paper, started writing a letter she would never send. Dear Marina and Katya, and she didn't know the other daughter's name. I'm the one who took him from you. I don't know if that matters to you. I don't know if knowing makes it better or worse, but I want you to know that I think about him, that it wasn't easy, that it wasn't clean. I can't apologize for doing my duty, but I also can't pretend that duty doesn't have a cost, and the cost is that your husband, your father, is gone. Because I made a choice, because I calculated that his life was worth less than the lives of my friends. I don't know if that makes me a soldier or a murderer. I don't know if there's a difference. She stopped writing, folded the paper, put it in her pocket. Ashford found her there an hour later. He sat down on another crate, didn't ask what was wrong, just waited. Did you hear? Kate finally asked. About Sokolov, yes. He had 2 daughters. I know, 6 and 4 years old. Ashford was quiet for a long moment, then, in Germany, the Soviet spotter I didn't shoot. I learned later that he was 17 years old. Conscript, first deployment. He probably didn't even want to be there. Does that make it easier? No, it makes it harder. Because you realize that the person on the other end of your scope is just like you, doing what they're told, trying to survive, probably scared. He paused. But you also realize that if you don't take the shot, people you care about die instead. How do you live with that? You accept that war doesn't give you clean choices, only terrible ones, and you make the choice you can live with. Kate pulled out the letter, showed it to him. Don't send that, Ashford said immediately. Why not? Because you can't carry their grief too. You're already carrying the weight of what you did. If you take on the weight of their loss, it'll destroy you. Maybe I should be destroyed. No. His voice was firm. You did what soldiers do. You made a hard choice under pressure. You saved your friends. That's what we're trained for. That's what we're asked to do. Sokolov was just doing the same thing. Yes, he was. And that's the tragedy of war. 2 people doing their jobs, both trying to protect their friends, both believing they're on the right side, and one of them dies. Ashford's hand rested on her shoulder. But you can't let that paralyze you. You can't let guilt make you forget why you took that shot. Kate folded the letter, put it away. I'll never forget why, she said, but I'll also never forget what it cost. Good. That means you're still human. The day you stop feeling it is the day you should stop doing this job. 2 weeks later, Kate was called to the base commander's office. She expected another debriefing, another round of questions about the extraction. Instead, she found a colonel she had never met before. Corporal Brennan, the colonel said. I'm Colonel Jessica Hartley. I oversee special operations marksmanship programs. Kate stood at attention. Ma'am. At ease. Hartley gestured to a chair. I've been reading interesting reports about a tower position. 820 meters, adverse conditions, unknown shooter. Kate said nothing. I'm not here to ask questions, Hartley continued. I'm here to make an offer. Advanced sniper school, instructor track. We need people who can teach what can't be taught from books. Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm qualified. You made a shot our doctrine says is impossible. You saved 37 lives, and from what I hear, you're struggling with the weight of what you did. Hartley leaned forward. That last part is why I want you, because the best instructors aren't the ones who never miss. They're the ones who understand what it costs to pull the trigger. Kate looked at the folder on the desk, the offer inside, the chance to move forward or to run away. She wasn't sure which. Can I think about it, ma'am? You have 48 hours. Kate spent those 48 hours in a kind of paralysis. The mission had been successful. She had been recognized, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Viktor Sokolov falling, saw two little girls waiting for a father who would never come home. On the second night, she found herself in the chapel. Not religious, just needed a quiet place to think. Ashford found her there. You're avoiding people, he said, just thinking. About Hartley's offer, about whether I deserve it. Ashford sat in the pew beside her. What happened on that tower, what you did, it's going to be with you for the rest of your life. You can run from it or you can honor it. How do I honor killing someone's father? By making sure it meant something. By teaching others to make hard choices. By passing forward what you learned so maybe the next generation makes fewer mistakes than we did. Kate was quiet for a long time. Then, you think I should take it. I think you should decide what kind of person you want to be. The one who made an impossible shot and then hid from it, or the one who made an impossible shot and used what she learned to help others. She met his eyes. Did you ever get past it? The shot you didn't take. No, but watching you take yours helped, showed me that my failure wasn't inevitable. It was just a choice I made, and I can't change it, but I can learn from it. On the morning of the deadline, Kate reported to Building 7, accepted the position, started the next chapter. But she carried Viktor Sokolov with her, the weight of him, the cost of him, the reminder that every shot, no matter how impossible, lands somewhere, and where it lands changes everything. 2 years passed before Kate truly understood what Ashford had meant about carrying the weight. The advanced sniper school occupied 300 acres of Wyoming wilderness where winter came early and stayed late. The conditions were deliberate. Cold tested students in ways that heat never could. Made equipment fail, made hands shake. Made the easy shots impossible and the impossible shots a matter of survival. Kate arrived in early September as the first snow was beginning to dust the peaks. She was 29 now. The shadows under her eyes had faded but never quite disappeared. She carried herself differently than she had at Forward Operating Base Winterhawk. Not harder, just more aware of the cost of certainty. The instructor cadre consisted of 8 shooters, all of them with combat experience that read like a history of American military operations for the past 30 years. Gulf War, Bosnia, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, they had collectively made thousands of shots, saved hundreds of lives, taken hundreds more. In the first week, Kate realized she was the youngest instructor by a decade, the only woman, and the only one who still woke up some nights with Viktor Sokolov's face in her mind. The training was brutal. 12 students per cycle, 8 weeks of intensive instruction. Most of them were already qualified snipers in their units. They came to learn advanced techniques. Long-range shooting, urban environments, extreme conditions, the kind of specialized knowledge that separated adequate from exceptional. Kate's specialty became immediately clear. Winter operations, shooting in snow, reading wind patterns that others dismissed as random, the impossible calculations that had saved 37 lives in a compound that no longer existed. Her first class assembled on a January morning when the temperature was -22 Celsius and falling. 12 faces looking at her with varying degrees of skepticism. She was young, female, unproven in their eyes. They didn't know about the tower shot. The official reports had never named her. "My name is Instructor Brennan," she said. "For the next 8 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to make shots you think are impossible. Some of you will succeed. Some of you will fail. But all of you will learn that impossible is a word people use when they stop calculating." A hand went up. Young specialist, maybe 23, confident in the way that people are before they've failed at something that mattered. "Ma'am, what makes you qualified to teach advanced sniper techniques?" It was a fair question. Kate could have pulled rank, could have deflected. Instead, she told the truth. 2 years ago, I made an 820-meter shot through a blizzard with a 47-degree vertical angle. I had been told it was impossible. I calculated that it wasn't. I was right. 37 people lived because of it. 1 person died because of it, and I think about both of those facts every single day. The room went quiet. "That's what qualifies me," she continued. "Not that I made the shot, but that I understand what it costs to make it." They believed her after that. The teaching came naturally in ways Kate hadn't expected. She could break down complex ballistic calculations into understandable components. Could demonstrate wind-reading techniques her father had taught her in Montana. Could show students how to find patterns in what others saw as chaos. But the real teaching happened in the moments between techniques. When a student missed a shot and started to doubt themselves. When the cold made their hands shake and they wanted to quit. When they had to decide whether to take a shot with low probability of success or wait for better conditions that might never come. Those were the moments when Kate taught what couldn't be found in manuals. 2 months into her first teaching cycle, a student came to her after a particularly difficult range session. He had missed 6 shots in a row. All of them should have been makeable, but the wind had been gusting unpredictably and he had second-guessed himself on every calculation. "I don't think I can do this," he said. Kate saw herself 2 years ago, doubting, invisible, waiting for permission to try. "Can't do what?" she asked. "Make the shot or live with making it, or both?" "Good. If you weren't questioning both, I'd be worried." She gestured to the range. "Set up again, same target, same conditions. I'll just miss again. Probably, but you'll learn more from failing while trying than from succeeding at giving up." He set up, calculated, adjusted for wind, fired. Miss. "Again," Kate said. He fired again. Another miss. Again. On the 4th attempt, he hit. Not center mass, but a hit. "Now tell me what you learned," Kate said. "That the wind was gusting from the northwest, not the north. That I needed to account for the funnel effect between those 2 hills. That my initial calculation was off by 0.8 mils. And that I needed to stop waiting for perfect conditions and start adapting to real ones." "That's the lesson," Kate said. "Perfect conditions don't exist. You calculate for what's real, not what's ideal." He studied her face. "Is that how you made your shot, the one you talked about?" "Yes, I stopped waiting for conditions to improve and started calculating for conditions as they were." "Did you ever doubt yourself during the shot?" Kate thought about that morning in the blizzard. The guard on the tower, the impossible angle, the certainty that everyone else was wrong and she was right. "Every second," she said, "but I didn't let doubt stop me from pulling the trigger." The student nodded slowly, turned back to the range, set up again. This time he hit center mass. 4 months after she began teaching, Ashford came to visit. He was retired now, living in Colorado, consulting occasionally on training programs. But he made the drive up to Wyoming to guest lecture on Cold War-era tactics. Kate watched from the back of the classroom as he taught. He looked older than she remembered. Gray hair gone to white, deeper lines around his eyes, but his hands were still steady when he demonstrated scope adjustments. His voice still carried the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to be heard. He taught them about shooting with iron sights. about manual range estimation before laser rangefinders, about making shots without the technology they took for granted. The students were fascinated. This was history to them, but it was Ashford's life. After the lecture, they walked the grounds together. Snow was falling, light, beautiful, nothing like the blizzard at Winterhawk. "You're good at this," Ashford said. "Teaching. I learned from the best. You learned by doing. I just gave you some numbers." They walked in silence for a while. The mountains rose around them, white and pristine and indifferent to human concerns. "I got something in the mail last month," Ashford said. "Took me a while to decide if I should tell you about it." Kate's stride faltered slightly. "Intelligence intercept, from the other side, translated. It was a funeral report." He pulled out a piece of paper, worn from being folded and unfolded. "Viktor Sokolov, military honors, attended by his unit, his widow, his 2 daughters." Kate stopped walking. "There were photos," Ashford continued. "I had them sent through back channels. I wanted you to see, to know who he was." "Why would you want me to see that?" "Because you need to carry the real weight, not an imagined one. He was a real person, a soldier, a father, and you killed him to save 37 other real people. That's the burden. It's supposed to be heavy." He handed her the paper. She didn't want to look at it, but she did. The translation was clinical. Name, rank, service record. Cause of death listed as unknown, possibly cardiac arrest. Buried with full military honors. Survived by wife Marina, daughters Katya and Irina. Below the text were 3 photographs. Sokolov in uniform, Sokolov with his wife, Sokolov holding his 2 daughters, both of them smiling. Kate felt something break inside her chest. "He looks like a good man," she said quietly. "He probably was. Most soldiers are." Ashford's hand found her shoulder. "But he was directing fire on Americans. He would have kept doing it until we were all dead or captured. You stopped him. That's war." "It doesn't feel like victory." "It's not supposed to. Victory implies winning. What we do is survive, and we make sure our people survive, even when the cost is someone else's father going home in a box." Kate folded the paper carefully, put it in her pocket next to the letter she had written and never sent. "How do you live with it?" she asked. "Really? After 38 years? How? You accept that some questions don't have good answers. You did what you were trained to do. You saved people who mattered to you, and you carry the cost of that for the rest of your life." He paused. "But you also use what you learned. You teach others. You make sure the next generation understands that every trigger pull has consequences. That's how you honor both sides, the mission and the cost." That night, Kate pulled out the letter again, read what she had written 2 years ago. Then she wrote a new one, to the family of Viktor Sokolov. "I cannot tell you who I am. I will never be able to. But I can tell you that his death was instant, that he felt no pain, that from where I was 800 meters away it was just mathematics and wind and a trigger pull. But I know it was more than that to you. I cannot apologize for doing my duty, but I honor his memory. I carry his name with me. I will not forget. Tell Katya and Irina that their father was a soldier, that he protected his friends until the very end. That is the truth, even if it comes from the person who killed him." She folded it, put it with the other letter. Ashford was right. She couldn't send it. But writing it helped somehow, made Viktor Sokolov more than just a target, more than just a tactical problem solved. 6 months into her role as instructor, Kate got a call from a forward operating base in Syria. A unit was pinned down. Similar situation to Winterhawk. Enemy observation post controlling high ground. Long-range shot required, bad conditions, the unit's sniper was on the line. Young corporal, never shot past 600 meters in combat. "Ma'am, I have the calculations," he said, "but I'm not sure I can make it. 900 meters, wind 15 to 20 knots. I've never attempted anything like this." Kate pulled up the data he had sent, the ballistic information, the environmental factors, the tactical situation. "You can make it," she said, "but you need to trust your preparation more than your fear." "How do you know I can make it?" "Because I've made harder shots, and because I'm going to walk you through every step." For the next 20 minutes, she coached him through the calculation. Wind reading, elevation adjustment, breathing technique, the rhythm of it, the patience required, the moment when doubt becomes certainty. "I'm set up," the corporal said. "See, target is exposed. Wind is holding steady. What's your heart rate?" 95. "Get it below 70. Take your time. You have the shot. Now you just need to believe it." Silence on the line. Kate could imagine him there, scope to eye, finger on trigger. The entire world narrowed down to crosshair and breath and the space between heartbeats. Then firing. 5 seconds of silence that felt like 5 hours. "Target down! Holy shit, it worked!" Kate felt something release in her chest, pride maybe, or relief, or the satisfaction of knowing that what she had learned could be passed forward. "It worked because you did the work," she said. "You calculated correctly, you executed properly. That's not luck, that's skill." "Ma'am, how do I deal with what I just did? I just killed someone." And there it was, the real question, the one that mattered more than ballistics or wind speed or any technical factor. "You don't deal with it," Kate said. "You carry it. You honor the life you took by being worthy of the lives you saved. And if you need to talk about it, you call me. Anytime. That's what I'm here for." After the call ended, she sat in her office for a long time, thinking about that corporal, about the person he had killed, about the people he had saved, about the weight he would carry now and how it would change him. She understood something then that she hadn't before. The impossible shot wasn't about the bullet. It was about what came after. Learning to live with what you had done, using what you learned to help others, passing forward the knowledge so the next person didn't have to learn it alone. That was the real lesson. Not how to make the shot, but how to carry the weight of making it. 8 months later, her first class graduated. 12 students who had arrived skeptical and left transformed. They had learned to make shots they thought were impossible, had learned to read wind and calculate trajectory and trust their preparation. But more importantly, they had learned that every shot mattered, that every trigger pull was a choice. That skill came with responsibility. On the last day, one of the students approached her. "Ma'am, I heard a story about you, about a tower shot, 820 meters, blizzard conditions." Kate regarded him steadily. "Stories get exaggerated. Was it true? What do you think?" "I think someone made that shot, and I think it changed how we think about what's possible." Kate smiled slightly. "The impossible shot taught me something. It's not about proving other people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that fear doesn't have to determine your limits." Is that what you want us to take away from this? I want you to take away that skill without wisdom is just marksmanship. But wisdom without skill is just theory. You need both. You need to know how to make the shot, and you need to understand what it costs to make it. After graduation, the cycle began again. New students, new challenges, new opportunities to pass forward what Kate had learned on that morning in the blizzard when she had pulled a trigger and changed everything. Ashford visited again in the spring. They walked the range together, watching the new class struggle with wind calculations and elevation adjustments. "Do you still think about it?" he asked. "The shot, every day. Does it get easier?" "No, but I understand it better. I understand that I made a choice, that it was the right choice given the circumstances, and that right choices can still have terrible costs." "That's wisdom," Ashford said. "That's what most people never learn." They stood watching a student attempt a 700-meter shot in moderate wind. He missed, adjusted, tried again, missed again. On the third attempt, he hit. "You're teaching them well," Ashford said. "I'm teaching them what you taught me, and what my father taught me, and what Viktor Sokolov taught me." "What did Sokolov teach you?" "That the person on the other end of the scope is human, that victory and tragedy can be the same thing, that the weight is the price of the choice, and the choice is worth making even when the weight is almost unbearable." Ashford nodded slowly. "For 39 years I carried the weight of a shot I didn't take. Watching you take yours didn't erase that weight, but it changed it, showed me that my failure wasn't inevitable. It was just a choice I made. and I learned from it. Do you have regrets? Every day, but not the same regrets I used to have. They walked back toward the main building. The mountains rose around them. Snow still capped the peaks even though it was April. The world continued turning. Students continued learning. The cycle continued. In her office that evening, Kate received a message through official channels. Intelligence intercept, addressed to her specifically though her name wasn't used, just her service number. She opened it. The message was in Russian, translated below. To the American sniper. I do not know your name. I do not know if you will ever receive this. But intelligence officers say you exist, that you made the shot that killed my husband. I write not to curse you. I write because I need to know. Did he suffer? The official report says medical emergency, but I know Victor. He was healthy, strong. I know it was not his heart. Please. If you have mercy, tell me he did not suffer. Tell me it was quick. My daughters ask when Daddy is coming home. I have told them he is a hero. I need to believe he did not die in pain. Marina Sokolova. Kate read it 3 times. Then she sat staring at the screen for 20 minutes. Finally, she typed a response. She didn't know if it would ever reach Marina Sokolova. Didn't know if intelligence would even send it, but she needed to write it. I cannot tell you who I am, but I can tell you that it was instant. He did not know. He felt no pain. From where I was, it was simply a task. But I know it was more than that to you and your daughters. I cannot apologize for doing my duty, but I honor his memory. Tell Katya and Irina that their father was brave, that he protected his friends until the end. This is true even though it comes from me. I carry his name. I will not forget Viktor Sokolov. She sent it through the intelligence channels. Didn't know if it would help, didn't know if Marina wanted to hear from the person who had made her a widow. But the silence felt worse than trying. 3 months later, another message came through the same channels. Thank you. It helps to know he did not suffer. I do not forgive you, but I do not curse you. We are both soldiers' families. We both know the cost. Katya asks if the American soldier is a good person. I tell her I do not know, but I think perhaps you carry his memory with honor. That is enough. Kate printed that message, put it with the letters she had written, the photographs Ashford had given her, the weight she carried. That evening she found Ashford in the instructor's lounge, showed him the messages. She wrote to you, he said quietly. Yes, and you wrote back. I had to. Ashford was silent for a long moment, then. 39 years ago, I didn't take a shot because I was afraid of the consequences. You took a shot knowing the consequences, and now you're carrying them with honor. That's the difference between us. You carried your consequences too, just different ones. Yes, but yours are harder, because you have to live with what you did not, what you didn't do, and somehow that seems more difficult. Kate looked at the messages again. She said she doesn't forgive me, but she doesn't curse me either. That's more than most people get. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's honest, and honest is rare in war. The next class cycle began. Kate taught them wind reading and trajectory calculation and breathing techniques. But she also taught them about Marina Sokolova and Katya and Irina, about Victor, who had been a father and a soldier and a human being, about the cost of certainty and the weight of choice. Some students understood, some didn't, but all of them left knowing that impossible wasn't about ballistics. It was about being willing to live with the consequences of trying when everyone else said you shouldn't. By her 3rd year at the school, Kate was promoted, asked to develop new training protocols for extreme condition marksmanship. She wrote manuals that incorporated her father's Montana wisdom and Ashford's Cold War experience, and her own hard-learned lessons from a blizzard in a compound that no longer existed. The students kept coming. She kept teaching. The cycle continued. One winter morning, standing on the range watching snowfall, Kate realized something. She had been thinking about Viktor Sokolov every day for 3 years, and she probably would for the rest of her life. But the weight of him had changed. It was still heavy, but it was no longer crushing. She carried him now not as guilt but as responsibility, as a reminder that every shot landed somewhere, changed something, cost something. And that understanding that cost made you better, not at shooting, at being human. Ashford found her there. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That I finally understand what you meant about carrying the weight. And it doesn't get lighter, you just get stronger at carrying it." "That's exactly right." He stood beside her watching the snow. "Your father taught you to shoot, I taught you to calculate. Viktor Sokolov taught you the cost, and now you're teaching others that all three matter. That's legacy." A student approached, young corporal, struggling with a long-range shot. "Ma'am, I can't make this shot. The wind is too unpredictable." Kate looked at the target. 900 meters, wind gusting, difficult but not impossible. "Show me your calculations," she said. The corporal laid out his work. The math was correct, but he was calculating for average wind, not pattern. "You're thinking about the wind wrong," Kate said. "It's not random. Watch it for 5 minutes. Find the pattern." The corporal watched, at first seeing only chaos. Then slowly the pattern emerged, the rhythm of the gusts, the lulls between them. "There," Kate said. "Every 43 seconds, 6-second window." The corporal set up, waited for the window, fired, hit. He turned to her with something like awe. "How did you know?" "Because I once made an impossible shot by finding the pattern everyone else said didn't exist. And I learned that impossible is just another word for not yet attempted." The corporal nodded, turned back to the range, set up another shot. Kate watched him work, watched him find the pattern, watched him build confidence through repetition. This was the legacy, not the shot itself, but what came after, the teaching, the passing forward, the transformation of weight into wisdom. The snow continued to fall, students continued to learn, and Kate continued to carry Viktor Sokolov with her, not as a burden anymore, but as a responsibility, a reminder. A teacher in his own way. She had made an impossible shot 3 years ago, killed a father, saved 37 lives, and learned that the real impossible part wasn't making the shot. It was learning to live with where it landed, but she was learning every day. With every student, with every lesson passed forward, with every impossible shot that became possible because someone was willing to try when everyone else said it couldn't be done. The wind shifted. The student fired again. Another hit. Kate smiled, turned to walk back to the building. Ashford fell into step beside her. "You know what I realized," she said. "What's that?" "That the shot I made wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning. Everything that came after, the weight, the teaching, Marina's letters, the students who learned from what I learned, that's the real story." "That's exactly right," Ashford said. "The shot was just a moment. The legacy is everything that comes after." They walked in companionable silence. Behind them, students continued to practice. In front of them, the mountains stood eternal and uncaring. And between those 2 points, Kate Brennan carried forward the lessons of an impossible shot made on a cold morning when the world was white and the stakes were survival. She had been invisible once, the backup, the one no one trusted with anything that mattered. Now she was the one they came to when the shot seemed impossible, when the conditions were terrible, when doubt whispered that it couldn't be done, and every time she told them the same thing. Watch for the pattern, trust your calculations, and when the moment comes when you know, then pull the trigger and carry the weight of where it lands with honor. That was enough. It had to be.